Dungeon Master has placed you in a dreadfully precarious position.
Dungeon Master and Dwarven Sword Master, Hobgoblins, Dwarves, Elves, and Halflings are some of the characters and terms used in this very complicated and controversial game.
You're playing the most phenomenal game ever created.
All right, welcome everyone. Another week, another Natural Ones, joined as always by Victor Gorchev. What's up, Vic?
Hey, not much, just chilling.
And we have our guest, Undying Zhao, on to talk about his new Kickstarter coming up for a 5e campaign setting called Empire of the Undying Sun. And, I first thing I'll say, first of all, glad to have you on. You've had me on your channel. I think you've had both of us on your channel.
Yeah.
Interview stuff. And one thing I'll say is like your website and your art that you have on there looks really good. It looks very professional.
Well, luckily I hired the right guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, sorry for the Rumble people. I'll just throw that out there. It didn't work. It stopped. I don't know what's wrong with it. So I think I'm just going to remove that.
Yeah. They can watch on YouTube.
Sorry.
Yeah,
I tried, but it's not working. So you guys can watch on YouTube or on X. Apparently it's working on X right now too. So it looks like it is. So that's good.
X usually works pretty easily. Although with X, I never really know if anyone's there because for some reason, very few people comment.
Yeah. Probably
That's
because
cool,
it's not live. I think it's just literally just a Twitter comment that you leave.
They have a live thing. If you click enough times, you'll get to the actual window and it'll say comments.
Okay, yeah. I know. I always feel weird watching streams in Twitter for some reason. I don't know. It feels weird.
Yeah, I'm looking on there, and it's at least live on X. So, and I can see a chat thing on the side. There's apparently 5 people watching on there. So,
oh, nice.
Nice.
Well, hello to the buddies.
if it didn't work on Rumble and you want to watch on X, you could probably find it on my profile if you have a Twitter account. So, sorry about that, everyone. But it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, I'm glad to have you on to talk about it. I Vic is a 5e guy, but we don't really, and actually Greg. So 2 of the people that are generally on here a lot are 5e people, but we don't actually talk about 5e too much. So it's kind of cool that you're here to talk about a 5e product. And you say on your webpage that let me actually bring up your webpage so people can see it. Actually, I'm going to throw it in the chat here so that people can see it as well. It's in the video description, but and I'll throw the Kickstarter in there too. It's in the video description, but I'll throw it in the chat as well. And let me present my screen. I should have got this queued up before. This shows how, professional we are over here. Super professional.
I know how that works.
So here is your website. You say here, it's modern game system for 5e, although it's funny. 5e is like 10 years old at this point.
I know. Well, I made that before they made the official announcement that they're making 5e 2024.
Yeah.
But I hear a lot of people talk about the differences, and online, at least, I hang out with a lot of people who like 1e or BECME or one of the older versions. I think we live in fantastic times where we have such a plethora of systems that you could choose from for whatever you want for your game.
Yeah.
So one thing I noticed about 5e is came out in 2014, right?
Yeah.
So when do people usually start playing D&D? How old do you think they are?
Teens, maybe.
Yeah, teens. late elementary school into the teens. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So let's just say like 13, an average of 13. So if you think about that, 10 years later, these people are 23. So you started off with some adventures, like they brought back Ravenloft. You have Tomb of Annihilation. You had some
Mhm.
pretty good ones, but since then they've kind of been weak tea.
Yeah.
So what are the recent ones they had? Strixenhaven. Like why do you want
Strixhaven,
to
yeah.
role play being in college? You should,
Yeah.
unless it's like level 1, you graduate from college and then you go on an adventure. Like I don't understand why you'd want to do that.
Yeah.
We had things like I know it wasn't Wizards, but the infamous barista module,
Mhm.
and things like that. So I think that really the people who started playing 5e are really in kind of like need of good old fashioned feeling content. So I wanted something that was dangerous, uh, something that you good luck getting through it with the same character you started.
Mhm.
It's possible, but I don't know if it's going to happen. And the other thing is, the things that I like in a game are I like a variety of settings that are exotic for me. So we start off. You start the game in a place called South Bay, which the game overall is horror. So it's sort of like New England horror. There's something in the woods. Something's not quite right. You end
Mhm.
up having basically zombie apocalypse where your town is invaded by thousands of undead. There's swashbuckling pirate adventures. You go to another kingdom that's like a mix of ancient Egypt and the Mayans and the Ottoman Empire.
Mm.
You're going through jungles and deserts looking for ancient ruins. And meanwhile, things are stalking you. So, where's that from Wizards?
Yeah.
People I think are looking for something more mature. And if you started at 13, by the time you're, like 23, 24, you're looking for something that's a little meatier. One in sort of the seriousness of the content, and also you want to play something where you affect the world. And that's exactly what happens in this game.
Yeah. Sounds awesome.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think it sounds really cool, and I think I think that there is something to like playing on 5e at this point. I think that there's going to be
Mhm.
this interesting gap in the future going forward,
Mhm.
because it's clear that you mentioned all these terrible kind of weak sauce adventures that WotC has created, and it's pretty clear with the new 2024 books that they are going to they're going to double down on all those things that
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
sort of silly and sort of weak and safe and just like
Soft.
not
Yeah.
soft. Yeah. And so I think you're right. I think there is going to be this. WotC seems to have this with editions, right? Where they release one
Mhm.
edition that's like really well beloved, 3.5, and then they release an edition that's hated, 4th, and then they release an edition that's well beloved, 5, and then they're going to release a version of 5e that's not going to, I think, be as well received.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be partly due to the VTT stuff as well.
Yeah.
They clearly want to funnel people onto their VTT, but kind of what you pointed out, there's people that have been playing for 10 years. A lot of them on Roll20. They have their whole campaign. They have all their stuff like on Roll20 or some other VTT. And putting myself in their shoes, I could see that being like, oh, I don't want to move all my stuff to some new. I don't care if it has all these
Yep.
fancy bells and whistles,
Mhm.
and I don't want to buy like, like one thing I saw, I think it was like Dungeons and Discourses. She was talking about it, where like the new PHB doesn't even have a character sheet in it. Like they really want you to use the D&D Beyond
Oh.
character sheet.
Yeah.
Or you can buy physical ones for like really expensive, I guess, like $15 for like a pad of character sheets for the new edition. And I just see that this like over monetization, penny pinching kind of thing it's going to turn a lot of people off, and they're going to look to other places,
sure.
and they're going to look to people like you or people like Vic or Greg at Chronicles of Iris, you know. So I think it will be. I think I agree. It'll be a very exciting time going forward for even the 5e sphere.
Yeah, and well, one of the nice things about not realizing they're releasing it, I think the new book comes out about 13 days before I release this on Kickstarter, is I get to say I have the first campaign guide compatible with 2024. The nice thing about it is there's a lot of stuff I just sort of erased anyways. So they what was it? Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. They changed, you know, how the race system works. I just changed it back, basically. And I, you know, there very specifically are half elves, and there's canonically story reasons why there are half elves there. And I like to take it back, you know. So I say in there that only the main humanoids exist in this world. So humans, elves, half elves, gnomes, halflings, those kind of things. You won't find any of the other creatures wandering around in any numbers. That doesn't mean there aren't any, and it doesn't mean that you can't play them, but you're going to have negative aspects to them. So I've had 2 test groups running through this game for a few years now. And of course, you know, there's always somebody who wants to be a tiefling. And that was fine, but I let them know, hey, if you're a tiefling and you're walking around like a tiefling, people are gonna think you're a demon, and they're gonna try to kill you. So we made a thing where their god gave them an amulet that could disguise them, but it doesn't work during dawn and dusk. And there were a few times that they forgot and gotten chased out of towns. You know, I had one guy wanted to play a minotaur, so people were trying to eat him to eat his heart and steal his strength. One guy wanted to be a warforge. Little did he know there's an area where mechanical men, you know, were created by wizards, and they had been known to go around murdering people. So the people who lived in that area were not too appreciative of him. So, you know, there's a lot of ways you can get that old school feel, where these races that you'd run into are very rare. But you can still include them in the game. It's just you have to give them caveats. You know, if you go back to 1E or basic, dwarves and elves were very rare, and you had to make the compromise. Do I want abilities that will help me to survive the first few levels but will handicap me later on? Or do I want the human, which is kind of squishy, but later on I'll get the really cool spells and I'll be able to use, you know, I'll be able to level up to the max. So I think that, you know, by putting race, or if you want to call it species, I'm okay with that, whatever, putting that back in, I think it really adds a lot to the depth, and people really have to think about how they want to play a character.
I think kind of like leaning back into the 2014 D&D stuff, I think that's going to be kind of the way forward, because just kind of to go back to the previous topic for a moment, like in my experience, the 2024 version is going to have like a very lukewarm reception. My group, which they're not like some based, like, you know, giga chats, like they watch Critical Role and like all that stuff, like they have like no interest in it. They already didn't really have any interest in like the later books like Tasha's Cauldron and stuff. They like the 2014 like stuff. They like, you know, 2014 to 2017, around that era of D&D. So I think the way forward for us third-party creators is to like lean into that and like offer that to people. So yeah, I think you have a good idea there.
Yeah, you know, and people. This one here is, you know, like racist class is the way to go. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your view, like 5e doesn't have racist class, so you know you can't really do that. I'm sure there's people that have tried to homebrew things that could do that, but my issue with a lot of that stuff that I see is that it often can break the game. And 5e is one of those games where there's lots of so many, like, when you write for it, there's lots of these interconnected things that you have to know that if you change this one thing, down the chain it trickles to something else that you might not realize.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
so you have to be aware of that. Plus, you know, like 1E doesn't have racist class, and I love 1E. So
in my personal experience, 5e is actually pretty finicky once you like dig into it. I'm not sure if you noticed that, but yeah.
Yeah, like I experimented with different things, like older versions for initiative, you roll a 1d6. Like,
Yeah.
well, that doesn't work because so many classes have like
Yeah.
+1 or advantage or something to initiative. It just makes it too clunky. So you have to you have to work with the system that you're given.
Exactly.
I do like certain things about 5e, in that one of the complaints about it is that it turns characters into superheroes, which is true, is really kind of true with the abilities. So for me, I just play that aspect up. As you go along in this world, you'll find out that there was, a big conflict 100,000 years ago or something, and there were people who were either gods or demigods, you're not really sure. And then, like, as you're going along, characters may start to notice, like, hey, we're kind of on that path that these people were. So it makes sense that, you start to gain these powers. And there's actually a point where some of the characters will be mistaken for gods. It's like, hey, look, there's this children's book that has pictures of these ancient gods that look just like this guy in your party. And that sets off a whole chain of events where you end up. But if you have, like, I understand the complaints about why you wouldn't want that, but if you have it and that's integral to the system of 5e, why not lean into it?
Yeah. So you still have the level 20 level cap and stuff like that, because there's some 5e systems that lower it to like 10. There's one Brancolonia that lowers it to 6 even, but yeah, you can do a lot with it. But yeah,
you can still advance beyond 6.
Yeah,
but
but you get like kind of like feats type, like little mini feats rather than levels.
Yeah.
Well, this is specifically for levels 1 to 10.
Okay.
And then maybe at some time in the future, I would like to do 11 through 20.
Yeah. So all the classes and stuff you've written specifically just to go up to 10, or does it offer new classes? I should ask first, or
there is one new class, which I'm still in the testing phase, but it's new in the sense that they could be heals or they could be offensive in that they get a certain amount of hit points back every turn, but basically they can take damage from other players. So, like, if you touch another player, you could take you could restore 5 hit points to them, taking 5 off from yourself. As they go on, instead of like a greater restoration or something to heal like a lost limb or eye, you'd be able to do that. You would lose your own for a while until it regenerates. And then if you want to use it in a more offensive capability, first you have, by touching an enemy, you would have the ability to duplicate some of their abilities and eventually steal it. So like if you had dire wolves, one on each side of you, and they've got pack tactics, you could take that pack tactic ability from them. Or even if you found a dragon, you could take the dragon's breath weapon and have it for your own.
Can you also transfer wounds that you have onto them? Like, that could be interesting. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So if you miss, if your friend has missing eye, you heal him. You have the missing eye, but so can you then like transfer the missing eye you have to like an enemy, like, or something like that?
Oh,
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So if somehow you were missing a hand, you could like take the dragon's hand, and now you've got a dragon hand, and he's got a stump.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, that could be cool.
So still working on it to make it, fun to play. But by the time we're released, I expect to have, a good working version of it. And you mentioned about feats. So that is one thing that I get rid of in this game. And instead I have a skill tree, and the skill tree, like for me, when you're playing a class, classes have pluses and minuses, and you have to pick what you want. I don't like feats because they seek to remove all the pluses and minuses and sort of even everything out.
Yeah.
The skill tree, on the other hand, is meant to enhance the player's ability to role play. So, for example, let's say you're proficient in religion. You could take points that you would get every few levels and be able to put it into the skill tree. And for religion, it breaks into 3 different categories. So one category would be that you have the prophet, you have the inquisitor, and you have the heretic. So for the prophet, you would gain like pluses to rolls to be able to convert people to your religion, but not necessarily anything else. The inquisitor, you don't gain any benefits to your religion, but you gain benefits against other religions that would be opposed. So like if you worship a god that's good, you would have advantages against an evil god. And the heretic, you would end up getting secret knowledge that makes you unpopular with whatever religion you're in, but you have more knowledge than the average person. And maybe even a way to more directly communicate with your god.
Yeah, that sounds awesome, actually. I like that.
Yeah, I like the feats are something that even from the very beginning in 2014 when I started playing 5e, when I switched, I kind of didn't allow my players to pick those because I remember reading those in the PHB and being like, I already understood that this is going to be a much higher. I was familiar with 40, so I was playing 40 before that, and so the power scaling was not a problem for me, right? Because 40 is very like super heroic, ridiculous as well. So coming into this, I was like, oh, you know, this I was seeking something a bit more subdued, but it was, I mean, it's still 5e, so it's not that much more subdued. It's more subdued compared to 40, but I looked at the feats though, and I was like, yeah, I'm not going to use these. Like the players already have so much stuff that they don't need these two. So I never really used those, but a skill tree system sounds really cool. I like the way I like seeing that sort of stuff, because removing feats and things like that isn't something where you like break the game too much.
Right.
But like you said, tampering with initiative, that is something that like you can actually ruin the game in some respects if you mess with it too much. So
and skills are kind of lukewarm in 5e, kind of like the how they normally work. It's like just roll this and like
yeah. I mean,
do something, but
I do kind of like the way that 5e does skills, just in the sense that like you can use a lockpick even if you don't have a lockpicking skill. You can try these things even if your characters aren't skilled in it. I just think to some extent they're too much of a catch-all. Like, oh, roll a religion check. Like, you know everything about every religion ever.
Exactly.
You know, and like just because you can do like a somersault doesn't necessarily mean that you can do like a rope climb or something, you know. So I try to sort of allow players to lean into how they see their characters. I've had some success that I had one guy who the guy who was playing the Warforged, his character was supposed to be he wants to see how humans work, their internal organs. And one of the feats for medicine, or not feats, one of the skill trees for medicine is you would gain bonuses to surgical knowledge and being able to correct heal people via surgery. And he's like, you know, that doesn't give me the mechanical advantages like if I took some of the other ones, but I really want to play that. So he took that. So that makes me pretty hopeful, you know, that it's actually sort of hitting that sweet spot that I think people kind of want.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's cool. So like, you know, I'm on the about section here, and it's talking about how, you know, the origin. So let's talk about like the origins of all this here. So, you know, this just started in your own personal play group, and like, I guess let's talk a bit about how it went from like your own play group to, you know, what it is now. Like what brought you along this path?
Yeah, well, what happened was I was in somebody else's group. Somebody else was the DM, And I remember it was right around Halloween, and a couple people had to go out of town. So I said to the people who were left, like, hey, I got this idea for a one shot. So I had the books for 2E way back when in the early 90s, but that was like right around Satanic Panic time. I could not find anybody else to play. So I never got to. 5E was the first one. So I said, oh, I want to try DMing one. And I did this haunted house story that ends up being chapter 4. And some of some of the things that ended up happening that I just used to brush players off, players like kept asking me about months later. Like they had to go to this cabin that's out in the woods, and they're like, oh, we're gonna steal horses. And I sort of had a timing thing planned in there. And I was like, oh, there's no horses. They're like, what? We're in a town. How are there no horses? And I was like, oh yeah, that was that thing about a month ago where they were all eviscerated, and that monster got them. And what was that? And like months later, they're asking me about they have to retrieve this item called the ingot. And they're like, well, what was the ingot? What did it do? Why did we have to get it? And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, if people are asking me about these things months later, maybe I'm onto something. So I sort of like wrote backstory to explain like all those things. And during this time, I had been wanting to write a comic, and I said, oh, I think that that maybe this is the world. Maybe this is the one that I can get some of my ideas. But then as I was starting to do that, it got to the point where I needed a story Bible. Because I was like, oh, what's this river's name? Who's that guy that runs the harbor? That kind of thing. And so I started writing it down, and I was like, well, you know what? I'm already writing a story Bible. Why don't I just make a campaign guide? Yeah. So through a process that I call poor decision making, 5 years later, here we are.
That seems to happen to a lot of us creators. We start off as just like this simple thing that we randomly want to do, and then like 6 months later, you have like a whole book written. That basically happened with me. Like I just wanted to make like some better gun rules, and then like all of a sudden I had like a 200-page book. So
yeah,
it's kind of funny how that happens.
Yeah, that's like what was it with Cowpunchers for me? It was like, oh, here's this little 24-page little dumb cowboy game that's like a D6 dice pool game. And now I did a second version of that that's like almost 200 pages, and have a couple books that are like that. So yeah, I totally get watching something grow from due to poor choices sometimes, because sometimes you get in the midst of it. I'm in that right now. Actually, I'm working on Atomic Punk. I was just talking to the guys about it, and it's like when you're writing it, you're like, oh, it's going to be so cool to have like every monster illustrated. And then for me, it's like, oh man, I got to illustrate every monster. This sucks. Why did I do this to myself? Oh, poor choices. So
yeah. I mean, you get to a point that I call sailing the sea of despair, which is like a point where you put a lot of work into it, but nothing's put together yet. And you're just like, oh, I don't know. Is this good anymore? I can't tell. But then like eventually you get to that point where you see it in a layout and you're like, oh, this does look good.
Yeah.
Imposter syndrome is a big problem too. So
yeah, we've talked about that. I mean, I kind of hope I don't lose it, because it kind of keeps me humble. But at the same time, you do have to be able to
balance.
You have to be confident in your abilities to some degree as well. So obviously you've been you started this 5 years ago, and you've been playtesting this. So is it being playtested by the same group of people? Like, how is that going? What are some things for other designers out there that maybe you observed that were like, ooh, this worked really well, or like, I don't know about this,
So that's a good question. So I've had 2 different groups. So the first group was the group that I played with before, that somebody else was the DM. That campaign finished, and we all moved to different places. And they, just to get together with friends and stuff, we tested that all the way until January, when 2 of the people there had a baby and then really couldn't play anymore. And so that was a lot of fun. When it's your friends, it's sort of a dicey situation because sometimes the friends will give you really good advice, like, I really didn't like this, I didn't like that, it's not clear here. And then other times they'll be like, oh, that was great, that was swell. And then it like takes one person to be like, no, that kind of sucked. And then everyone else is like, oh yeah, but they won't tell you ahead of time. So they were good overall when I could finally nail them down on giving me some critiques. But then the second group I had, so I had a lot of revisions between the first and the second group, a lot of rewrites. And the second group, I think I knew one person. It was the person who was my original editor. She had to drop out and her husband started editing. But then, as she put it, her dice bag had blue balls, so she wanted to jump into the game. So she played for a little while. And it was great because I learned, first of all, it was good to judge, did the changes I make work well? Like in chapter 1, originally there's like this heist in the Black Pyramid, which is this weird temple that they built in your town. You don't know what it's there for. But the problem is a lot of people were complaining that they didn't really understand the politics of what was going on. So I said, okay, I took the same heist, but I moved it over to, there was a museum that for some reason no one wanted to go to. But I put it in the museum, and like you're encouraged to go either, if you're trying to rob the crystal, you case the place, or if you're set to protect the crystal, you're sent there to go look for weaknesses. And so when you go in, of course, there's all the displays that has the history of the place you start, South Bay, and the history of the country you're in, and why humans hate elves and that kind of stuff. So like that really worked a lot. And then the other thing
to hate elves?
No, but but the other thing was, I've had, so this second group, like every couple of months, somebody, like I had one guy who was in the military, he got deployed, he couldn't play anymore. I have right now I got a guy who's homeless. He got evicted from his apartment. He's living on the street somewhere. So like every few months, I'm constantly having to add new players. So at each level, I realized like I didn't have an in for new people. Like if you miss that beginning stuff, why would you care about any of this?
Yeah.
So that really made me rewrite it so that at any entry point, there's something for your character to want to do. So that I would say those are two big things. I learned also a good addition as a DM is just like there's DM's inspiration. I added in DM scorn, where if they don't answer their surveys, I promise I will re-roll something at the most inopportune time for them. So there's nothing wrong with threatening your players as well.
Well, especially if you want feedback. That's something I've talked to with people too, is like, I've tested some of my stuff with people, and sometimes you get good advice, sometimes you get like you got to coax it out of them. I hate that though when it's at the end of a session and you're like, well, that was fun. I'm like, well, okay, well, what was fun about it? The thing. Yeah. Like no, but I need some more some more to work with here. Although on the Gilded server, I feel like our Gilded server is a good place to test stuff too, because we have a lot of people that are willing to say to let you know if they don't like something or if they do like something. So that's been good. I play
tested. They don't like the wrong things.
Yeah, sometimes that's another thing too, I think, and I don't know if you encountered this as well. And Vic and I have talked about this, is when you're asking for feedback from people, especially when the product is not finished yet, especially when you're still like, this is still a work in progress, it's still developing, but in your mind, you still have a vision, you still have you still have like, this is like the ideal thing of where I see this going. Like maybe I don't have a good plan, but I have like an idea of what I want this to build to and what I want it to be. And then sometimes people give you advice and they're like, they don't have that access to that information. Obviously, they don't have that vision. So they'll give you advice like, well, maybe you should do this, this, and this. And it's like, well, no, that would be very like, I get where you're coming from, but that would be like very antithetical to the goal that I have in mind. Whether that's feasible for me to reach that goal or not, I don't know. But I'm curious if you've encountered that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah, for sure. Like for one thing with the with the talent trees, they always want like more abilities and more powers. But for me, I don't want anything on there to overpower what they already give you in 5e. So like for example, monks, I think at level 9 they can run straight up walls. So I want to make it that if there were that ability in there, it would have to be you wouldn't be able to get it until after monks would get that ability. Like it's okay if you get the effect of a level 1 spell like when you're level 10, because that doesn't tip the balance. But if you got an extra level 1 spell at level 2, that's a pretty significant increase. So and then there were some people, so part of it is with the talent tree, like I wrote things in an inaccurate way, I would say. One of the I think to athletics will allow you, my original intent was to allow you to use something like a great sword one-handed and have a shield. But the way it was written was ambiguous. So people were trying to dual wield great axes. And it was like, no, that's way too much DPS.
That's not what I meant.
Yeah, exactly. So, which is the point of a test group, right? Because you want to see how people break what you had intended.
Well, go ahead. Sorry, finish.
Oh no, there's stuff like that story wise. So I take the, there's always that sandbox versus
I was going to ask
railroad. Well, I've come to realize that that's not quite an accurate scale, but just on that scale, the way this game works is certain events happen on certain dates, and there's only a few that you really have to interact with. If the DM is like, well, no, this level's stupid, they could have the players do something else during that time, but another group will do what's written in the book. If your group doesn't want to do that. And also almost all the levels, there's a couple of months between the end of one venture and the start of the next one. So you can still play, you can still have your characters play. It's a good time to like do all their backstory stuff, or if they want to, grind something out that sounds interesting or explore further different areas, you as the DM can add more stuff. So in terms of that, I haven't really had a lot, because the quote unquote story takes place over a long period of time. There's this wizard couple, John and Mabel Worthington, who you meet Mabel, but she's very old and like a grandma, and she's kind of out of it. And then later on, you find this cave of it's a wizard's lair, and he's extracting souls from people's bodies, and he's using blood to fuel automatons, and he's trying to create some device that players may put 2 and 2 together and realize that it's that couple that they met, and they may not. And then later on, it becomes more obvious, that what those 2 were up to has directly led to everything that got you here, and then it's up to your players to fix it or not. So the only problem with laying something out like that you incrementally find out is it takes several levels to get through. And the worst thing about my test groups is that they're every other week for only 3 hours, and like sometimes we miss a week and we just have to go a month between. So it's a slow process. It's not like how you would normally play with your friends, I would say. So that is a negative aspect, and something where sometimes they'll talk about things that are completely off base because they made something up in their head, and then it takes so long to get to where the answer is. They're like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
So that's something to look out for as well.
Well, that's cool. I was going to ask you too about like what is the style of this like as a campaign setting. So, I think that's neat that it sounds like it's sort of like there's events going on and in the world, and the players can travel and kind of obviously kind of choose where they want to invest their time as far as like interacting with certain things within the campaign. So I think that's cool. I'm not a fan. I know people love it. Greg's not here, and I know he likes Dragonlance. I'm not a fan of like the Dragonlance, like, and then we got to get to this point, and then we got to get to this point, and then we got to get to this point. Like I like giving. I go a little extreme in some respects with my games, which I get people not liking that, but I like to have I like to have that the players, because I'm sure you've had this too, where the players are like, is the seneschal the vampire, and you're like, he wasn't, but that's pretty cool. So now he is.
Yeah.
I like being able to have that sort of thing. Like, as the players are sitting there discuss stuff, and you're like, they say things like that, like the seneschal must be the vampire. And I'm like, I didn't have that planned, but that's actually pretty good. So I'm gonna go with their suspicions here, because that would actually be cooler.
Yeah, I mean, I tried to design it so that it's open for that. So in my opinion, there's 3 kinds of tabletop role-playing game books. Type 1 is like your player's handbook, your DMG, monster manual, that are just rules and items and monsters and stuff. Type 2 is maybe like an Ebron, where it's a setting and there's a lot of hooks, but there's no particular storyline to follow. And then the third type is that there is a storyline.
Yeah.
So technically, I would say this is a type 3 where there is a storyline, but I try to make it robust enough. Wandering monster tables, tons of hooks, tons of player factions, so that if you don't want to follow the storyline that I've set out, that storyline still happens, but you can take your party and do all sorts of different other things.
So you have like a world map and everything, and
it's not a complete world map, but it's so you start off in a place called South Bay, and there will be reasons for you to stay in that area, at least until the Battle of South Bay, where thousands of undead come and destroy the town. And then you're sort of forced out. And there are reasons why you would want to go to the Empire of the Undying Sun. Certain people who are left from the town, they say, we want to go there and seek sanctuary. Other people want to go there to hire mercenaries. And also, in this world, gods are very much alive, and they will interact with you, especially through dreams. And you, they'll tell you like, hey, we need you to go that way. So there are indications, but if your players are like, nah, we want to be pirates. Okay, there's all sorts of tables for that, mysterious islands you find on the way, and so there's a lot of fun that you can have. There's also so if you sign up either on the website, just register on the website, or if you follow on the Kickstarter before the launch of the book, you will get a free module written by Bill Sylvie, aka the Dungeon Delver, which takes place in this world. And I give a like a date range. Like, this would be the optimal date range for this adventure to take place. So the DM, they're not sort of main points of a story, but they're things that a DM could throw in there if they find it interesting. You could just play a bunch of those. I plan, probably by the end of the year, I'll start releasing one once a month, some written by other people in my world, and some will be written by me. So they will sort of slot into the game as you want it. As a DM, if you say, "Oh, we're having fun on the ocean," or "Oh, this desert stuff is really cool. What else can we do here?" You can add that in as you please. So I try to make it overall, it's horror, and then like different areas will sort of focus on different kinds of horror. But it's, as a DM, like I mentioned, when the town gets invaded by the undead, whatever you're doing, is kind of going to be affected by all of a sudden you're getting overrun by undead. So you will tangentially at least touch the main story at some points.
Yeah. So you mentioned there's like specific dates and stuff happen on specific dates, and we all know the controversial topic one-on-one time. So, but like, and I'm sure you're not doing like Browser like one-on-one time, but how do you handle that? Is it just kind of up to the GM to be like, yeah, no, it's this date, now this happens, or do you actually have like a mechanic in place where there actually is like a sort of progression of time that like you have to keep track of?
So I give starting dates. So there's a whole timeline built out that the DM can check out beforehand, and there are specific dates for when each level will start. And you can, so let's say level 1 should technically in the time take Fairy Hill is the one that you'll get free if you if you do. It's almost ready to go. It's written. I just need to do maps and things. Sorry, but the calendaring. So technically, it might take 2 days of in-game time, and then I think the next one starts like 2 or 3 months after that in-game time. So it's up to the DM what they want to do. Like you can have all sorts of other adventures with the characters at level 2 before they start the official level 2 adventure, or you could just ask people like, hey, what would your character do with 2 months of free time? And they might say just getting drunk every day at the tavern. Or they might say, hey, I want to go look for this. And if it sounds interesting, you can make like a little adventure for that, and you can play it if you choose, or you just fast forward to when the next start date is, depending on how quickly you want to get through it and how much fun your players are having in each area.
Nice.
Okay. Yeah, that's one of my favorite 5e products. I've talked about this a lot. Is Adventures in Middle Earth. I haven't looked at the new Free League version, but it would do a lot of its adventures like that. So, before I ran it for Vic, I was running for a group of in-person friends a while ago during the 5e days of the Mirkwood campaign, which I think takes you from level 1 to 15 in Mirkwood within the whole game system. And it's cool because it gives like dates for like when this adventure is supposed to happen, and it has these progressions. And obviously the players don't have to touch everything in there. It feels very, you could run it like a railroad, but it is also presented in a way where, they can try and interact with certain things. And kind of like what you said, there's the necromancer in Rookwood, and he's going to do what he's going to do. And that's what he's going to do, and they also had these other supplementary adventures, which sound similar to what you're doing, which were like, here are the Eberron adventures, and here's like so-and-so. And then it would give you dates, like this should take place between this year and this year. And it would even give a season, because downtime is and seasons are a big deal in those kinds of games. So I found that really cool, because it was sort of like I did it a couple times where I was able to sort of slot in these like little smaller adventures that were they didn't really have anything to do with the Mirkwood campaign story of like that whole thing, but they were still cool because they were just like these little one thing, like they could take up a session or two, and I'd slot them in, and the players would have at it, and it just provided more stuff to make every, like if I were to run that campaign again, it would be a little different every time I ran it, because of how things slotted in and what players choose to do. So,
well, that one has the benefit of like taking place across like 30 years. They actually have rules if you're a human for your kids to take over and stuff. So,
and So in different parts of this game, like it turns into hex crawls. Like when you're crossing the ocean, it's kind of a hex crawl. Later on, when you're going through the jungles and the desert, it's kind of a hex crawl. So if really, there's only so much hex crawl you can do before it starts to get boring. So that makes like these kind of modules pretty handy. So if you back at the physical level, I'm going to give everybody who does that one year of the modules for free. So it should be 12 modules.
Oh, cool.
I'm not 100% sure what's coming out with them. I haven't planned them all out, and there's some other people I want to talk to about maybe writing them. So we'll see what is there. But that's fun. And another thing I mentioned is I never liked the way that they really do planes in Dungeons and Dragons. So I've reworked both the astral plane and an ethereal plane. The astral plane is a dream realm where every night when you go to sleep, you go to the dream realm. It's just when you wake up, you don't really remember. But the dream realm is a place where gods and spirits will try to talk to you. And so they can influence how much you would remember, or you might just remember like a feeling that your god wants you to do something or another. But I've set it up so that you can have adventures in the astral plane that will then affect you on the material plane. So essentially, a DM could set up a Freddy Krueger type character, or if your players took enough initiative, they could be Freddy Krueger for somebody else.
Nice.
That's pretty cool.
And there's effects where, just from a simple, you don't let them sleep at night. So they're going to lose, what do you call it? Not a constitution point, but like they don't get the long rest.
Yeah. Exhaustion. Do they get level exhaustion?
Yeah. And they wouldn't gain their, since powers in 5e or abilities in 5e are so much based on that long rest, you won't get them back, and you won't be able to recoup your hit points. So depending on how you treat people in that world, I had one player who screwed over some hags, and they haunted him and every couple of nights. He just wouldn't get a good sleep, and that really sucked when they were trying to, go through dungeons, and they really needed his abilities.
But that's cool. That creates a lot of it makes you think. It makes that player think about the hags, for instance. These are now recurring villains, and then maybe it creates another adventure. Where it's like, I'm tired of not getting sleep. I'm going to go back and hunt these hags down and kill them.
Or follow through on your promise. One of the two.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do that. And the ethereal plane is basically the plane of the dead, where, if you're able to see into it, which you may find some objects that allow you to do that, you'll be able to see where like ghosts and spirits are. And you would also be able to see you might find some ruins somewhere. But if you could see into the ethereal plane, you could see what it looked like. 100,000 years ago, and make it much easier to figure out what your goals are in this. What's just a pile of stones.
Nice.
You got a question here from Nostromo. You probably are not going to do this, but he's saying, are there any plans to release a version of Empire of the Undying Sun compatible with TSR era D&D?
I would like to. I would eventually like to do a 1E and a 3.5 version. The 3.5 mostly because then I could get Pathfinder players as well. But I can't promise it right now because this has been a lot more work than I thought it would be. And just to finish it, there's so many mechanical things. Like in chapter 9, there's a giant pyramid that level 9 is all one giant mega dungeon that as you go through it, you rearrange that pyramid like it's a Rubik's Cube. And it took me probably about 9 months to figure out how to make that work mechanically. So there's a lot of things that need to be buttoned up here, but I'm hoping probably my plan is this campaign should finish around Halloween on Kickstarter. I want to have you'll get some files right away, probably through level 8. Those will all be done. And then over the next year, we'll have some feedback, get some revision. I'm a horribly dyslexic, so I'm sure I misspelled a lot of things. And I want to get the book out to people by Halloween 2025. So after that is probably when I would look into converting it. But I will say one thing. I am not the music industry. I am not going to charge you more money to like buy a CD versus a record and make you buy it again and make you buy a cassette tape and whatever. If you buy this and then I do release that for another version, 1E or 3.5, you will be able to download that at no cost. You can download whatever version you want if you buy it.
Nice.
Here's a Kickstarter page for people up there too.
Yeah.
I threw the link in chat. I'll throw it in there again just so you guys can get notified. Yep.
There
it is. That's cool. I totally get that. Like I would love to see, for instance, like a 1E version or like an OSC or BX version or something like that. But
yeah,
you gotta get the main thing that you're promising done. So,
tell me about it.
Yeah, I gotta focus on that first. But it shouldn't be too hard. Most of it is really kind of version agnostic. The only thing is the stat blocks, are going to have to be redone. And then there's certain places that call for advantage or disadvantage where I have to make a decision. I mean, I could just say in 1E roll 2d20s and take the highest instead of specifically saying advantage. Or do I want to do like a percentile or so? Some decisions will have to be made, but that's once I polish this guy off.
Ultimately, it's not that hard to make things compatible, to be honest. Like if you're like halfway decent dungeon master and you have like an understanding of the system that you're using, like it doesn't really matter if the module says like no roll for religion. Like I'm sure you can figure out a way to do that in first edition too.
Yeah. And even like hit die and things like that. Like you can you can figure out how to make that work in like 1E or BX or something like that.
Yeah.
It'll take a little extra work, but it's not like it's impossible. I've done that kind of stuff before as well, drawing things from another book where it wasn't exactly designed for that book or that system, but you're able to make it work. So
so I will say that a lot of the modules that will be on the site, they're already 1E and 5E compatible. So you just have to fix the versions you want.
Nice.
Neat. Let's see. Who I want to know who's doing all this black and white art for you. It's very good.
So there's a few people. Actually, let me if you don't mind, let me see. Let's go.
Yeah, the art is great, very pulpy.
Oh, here you go.
Did it work? Oh, there it goes. So this guy is a Malaysian guy named Kong and Kang. And he, was absolutely fantastic. And if anybody knows where he is, please let me know. This is some of the first stuff I got commissioned for it.
It's really good.
Let me see here. He did this one.
Yeah.
He did this one, and then this one is great too. In my opinion,
awesome.
I think this one is my favorite. This one was the first that he did. So I mean, he's fantastic, and I wish him well wherever he ended up. I've got another guy, Peter Gilmore. He does a lot of comics. if you like horror, I highly recommend the book Jack the Ripper Vampire Hunter.
I mean, that sounds awesome. I'm in.
He did this one as well. Let me see if I have any others. Some of them have naughty bits, so I don't want to show those on other people's channels. I don't need to have you get strikes. And then this is Rod Looper. So he's probably best known for a comic called Black Tiger, which, if you like Kung Fu comics, I highly recommend it. But he's done a number of things. So I've got the 3 of them so far. I will be doing some of it, and if somehow this ends up being a big success, I'm definitely there's some other people that I'm talking to that if I can afford to have them do more, I will.
Yeah.
And one thing I want to mention about this is if you buy the campaign guide or back it on Kickstarter, you're actually going to get 2 books. So one is the campaign guide itself, which is meant for the DM. It's got all the hidden stuff and all the backstory, but you're also going to get a thinner book, which would be the player's guide. And the player's guide, I mean, come on, guys, you're spending money on like all this cool art and stuff, and you want to show people that, right?
Yeah.
So it's going to have a lot of the art in there, and it's going to have like the basics about like, these are the races that you could pick from. Here's, the extra class, and give you a little bit of the history of, the starting area around South Bay, and then the Empire of the Undying Sun. So that will probably be a PDF unless we hit a certain level on the Kickstarter, to which I could afford to print that as well. So, all this great art, you'll be able to show it off to everybody.
Yeah. That the Malaysian guy, I think you said Malaysian. That art is awesome because it reminds me of like old Solomon Kane art and like the old Conan art and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He loved
Sick.
John Buscema, so it's like yes.
great like line texture and all that stuff.
Yeah,
it's really good. So much better than me.
Yeah, it's funny because originally I thought like one way to save money is I would get people to do black and white work and I would color it. And then like people started turning in work that was just too good. And it's like, I just could not improve this picture by coloring it. It's way better black and white.
Yeah. And I think that the black and white, it gives it like a very cool old school feel. And I think that's kind of on theme with what you're talking about here, where, it's a more modern 5e system, but you're approaching it from a more old school mindset. So I think the art kind of plays into that, I think. So.
Yeah. I mean, I'm hoping this campaign guy would be the one where, like, if you have to drag in some old grandpa kicking and screaming who doesn't want to, let go of 1E, like this would be the one that he would feel comfortable playing and enjoy because it feels like the games that he used to play.
Yeah. And if you keep the rest of the book, like, black and white is also cheaper to print. I mean,
yes,
that is a big concern for us indies. So
yeah,
I realized that later.
Yeah, like with Makuhito, it worked out because of the way it looks. It's really, it has black and red on the inside, but that did increase the cost of printing from just black, significantly for me. So.
I had the same problem with the first Modern Necessities. That's why this new one, the base version, is just black and white, people, because I lost a lot of money.
Because just adding that one color is enough to make it like more expensive. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, and that also makes me want to. I mean, do you have a printer in mind? Is this going to just be like the Filthy Drive-Thru RPG or Lulu, or are you going to have? Is this offset print or hardcover, softcover?
I want to do it hardcover. I haven't quite decided yet. One of the issues is I haven't quite figured out how many pages it's going to be, so I'm not sure how to get the quotes for it. I'm doing some final edits. I got final edits from my editor. And I'm working on it, and hopefully in the next week or so, I'll start putting that in the final layout, and then I'll be able to, estimate. I have to say, when I started this, I thought like, oh, I'll do 100 pages. Wow, I've never really written 100 pages like that before. And I remember I was on Kickstarter and I was looking at somebody's campaign and it said like 450 pages. And I said, oh, thanks for ruining it for the rest of us, overachiever. And now I look at it and it's like, yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah.
So it's probably going to be close. My guess is it would be somewhere between 400 and 500, depending on how much art goes into it.
Yeah, on Drive to RPG, I'm just going off the top of my head here, but like going off like 200 pages is about $15 to print. So maybe double that, I guess. So yeah, $30 to print for hardcover print on demand. I mean,
so yeah, I'm hoping to find probably not Drive Through RPG this time. I'm going to be just doing the Kickstarter and then selling it on my own site.
Okay,
and then maybe in the future, well, I might sell the PDF on Drive Through RPG.
Yeah,
we'll see.
I mean, couldn't hurt.
We'll see. Yeah.
Yeah.
But for now, I'm just going to get a bunch printed, and then I may go to some cons and try to sell it at cons. So hopefully, if I can get that number up, then I'll be able to cut down the price per volume. So I am not sure the price just now.
Well, that's cool. Hardcover is nice too. I will say, like, as far as like print on demand stuff goes, Lulu does make pretty good stuff. Even their hardcovers, like I done a side-by-side comparison with like hardcovers from Lulu and hardcovers from Drive Through RPG, and it's like, I don't know if it's the glue they use at Lulu that make, because Lulu's more expensive, but like I have a Rule Cyclopedia hardcover that just from like regular table use of just laying flat at the table, it's like losing pages. And same with my 1E pods. They don't last super long, but all the hardcovers that I've done through Lulu have held up pretty well. So,
well, also just the visual quality is a lot higher.
Yeah. But that's cool. I mean, I hope you figure that out. If you have questions, you could probably ask Vic or I or anyone else, that kind of runs.
I will definitely have questions.
Because we've dealt with all this stuff before, so well, especially me, man. Like offset print, getting this into the country. Oh my gosh, I every time someone sends me a picture of this on Twitter or something like that, it like is like a weight off my shoulder.
Yeah, mine should be arriving soon. I actually had to pay import costs yesterday on it. I had to pay like €8.
Oh, sorry.
No worries. I'm used to that, but
okay.
Stupid Dutch laws.
Oh well. I wonder if other people have to deal with that. I only charge people for their because the fulfillment company gave me like, these are the rates for all these places all over the world, and so like if they I just charged them what it would cost. So
it's just funny because it was printed in Europe and then sent to the US and then sent back to me, and I have to pay more for it.
I'm sorry. You get the nice shiny black cover.
But watching you struggle with that, getting all that stuff done, definitely cured me from ever wanting to do offset print anytime soon. I'm just sticking with print on demand for as long as I can. I'm riding that until the wheels fall off.
I might go back to it just because it was really cool. It was a horrible experience, but a good experience. I mean, you're gonna feel this too, man. It's like this is your first Kickstarter you've ever done.
Yeah.
It's I've told people this before, I didn't get gray hairs until I did a Kickstarter.
Well, it's not something I have to worry about, luckily.
No, but gray eyebrows, maybe.
Yeah, I'll go full Gandalf. I kind of figured for this one, like, I'm not going to get a fulfillment company. I'm going to try to do it myself, probably offset. Try to make it as difficult as I can for myself, so that for the next one, I know if it's really worth it or if I could just say screw it.
Yeah. I made it a little easier on myself and paid people to do it, and I'm just like, oh man, I wonder if I could pay someone. I wonder if I could pay someone to do this part next time too. So it's like,
I've had very bad luck with trying to pay people to do things for this project. Like I made the website should have made the website in January. I had a whole month, could not find one person to return a phone call or an email about making it. So eventually I had to say, oh, screw it, I'll do it myself. Then just like artists, luckily Pete and Rod have been pretty good. Otherwise it's like just pulling teeth.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
I can say as an artist, like myself included, we can be flaky a-holes sometimes, and so on behalf of all artists, I apologize on that front.
Yeah, I used to work in marketing, so I would have to hire artists all the time, but I think when you have like the veneer of a big company behind your name, it makes people more eager to do business with you rather than, hey, I'm just some guy making a thing on my own. I have money, really.
Yeah, and then you just kind of get like put on the back of the line somewhere, basically. Yeah, I'll get to your stuff eventually.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to throw shade at my artists. I love my artists, but it's definitely it's definitely a struggle sometimes. It definitely adds like months to the the project time.
Yeah, and I mean, I knew I would have that problem with if I had like 20 projects under my belt. I'm sure people would be like, "Oh, okay, he's serious about getting things done."
Yeah.
But when you're doing the first one, you gotta do what you can.
You gotta just find some good artists and then just kind of keep them. Like, I'm getting to that point where I have like my go-tos, and they know that I pay on time, that I pay pretty much immediately, so that helps a lot too. So
yes.
Once they work with you, they're like, oh, okay, I can trust this guy.
Yeah, my policy has always been pay within 24 hours of receipt.
Yeah.
So luckily, once I do get to work with people, they generally want to work with me again.
Yeah. I've paid within minutes before. Like John knows this. Like he's like, yeah, here's the outfit, and like 2 minutes later, he's got like $1,000 on his PayPal. Like, okay,
cool, thanks, Vic.
Yeah.
But that's cool. I'm excited to see this and see where you go with this. We still got a lot of time left. If you have the time, is there anything else you want to point out with this, or
wargaming? I'm bringing wargaming back.
Oh, I saw that on your website. Let me switch that over here. Let's see.
Be back real quick. I can still hear though. So
let me add the new screen here. Not that one. This one. Yeah, you had a section on your website about that. I didn't get a chance to read it yet, but I'd be interested to know about that, because that is definitely like an aspect of 5e that I think is sort of lost, because we talked about this idea of the players being a little overpowered. So it is kind of like at a point where, well, why would, and I've heard people say this to me who don't kind of understand the old school mindset of, well, why do I want to lead a bunch of soldiers around? It's got to be about me, I even talked to 2e people that are like this, that are all about that. Like, no, I'm the hero. Like, it's about the party. I don't want a bunch of like doofus hirelings behind me. I'd love to know like what your take on this is.
So, I kind of look at like the leveling system in 5e. Like, if we can think of like World War II, you're storming the beaches of Normandy. Levels 1 through 5, you're just hoping to get off that boat. You're just hoping to live. Levels like 5 to 10, you're now a sergeant. You're still just hoping to live, but now you're responsible for a few other people. You got to make sure your guys get off that beach. Like levels 11 to 15, you're those paratroopers who go in the night before. And if you don't cut those bridges, and if you don't take out some of those pillboxes, your guys aren't going to make it off that beach. And 15 to 20, like you're the general. You're in charge of planning all of this stuff. As I mentioned before, your characters may or may not be on the same path as deities once were. Well, if you look through a lot of gods and stuff, they always have followers, right?
Yeah,
sure.
So you should be attracting followers. So it's meant to be very subtle so that players don't necessarily realize what's happening is happening. In chapters 1 through 4, you're meeting different groups of people, and some of those people you're meeting are in diametrically opposed groups, and you have to figure out how you're going to deal with them. Like you can be pro group A or pro group B, or you could try to find some way to split the middle. So DM should be keeping track of your rep with those groups. But I didn't want it to be obvious because I don't like games where you have to farm rep to get something done. So the DM should just figure out, are these people favorable to you or not? And then when you get to level 5, you're basically the town you're in, there's thousands of undead around there. And there's not a whole lot of hope that you're going to beat this army. So you're trying to get everyone evacuated as fast as you can. And you're in charge of part of this defense. You can go and rescue the noble families that are stuck up in like the military barracks, or you could go outside and you could try to create a distraction so that some groups of people could flee into the woods. And then later on, like you could escort people to get on ships to try to get out through the harbor, or you could try to hold off the horde while other people are escorting them to get out to the harbor. And while you're doing that, you get to command some of the town warden. That's like the town guards. So you decide like, okay, you do this, you do that. And there's a few priests that would be helping them. And so you get to be in charge of these people on small levels. Then you're in pirate adventures. Well, there's a captain to the ship, but once things start going south on the ocean, you sort of have to tell people what you want them to do. Like, hey, we need to focus on finding food. We need to focus on this and that. And so as you're going through this adventure, you're more in charge of people. And then once you get to the point where some people may have been mistaken for gods, your party has probably also taken part in this very famous tour. It would be like World Cup for the Europeans, Super Bowl for the Americans. So people start to recognize you and they may want to follow you. So you can do what you want. And then that country just descends into utter chaos, civil wars everywhere. And so you have to make deals with people. There's Zhao who feel that whole country used to be theirs and they were driven out into the desert. So you could ally with them to, take over the country. And in exchange, they'll help you when you try to go back to South Bay, the original area, and defeat the undead. You can hire, like, the amounts of money that you get start to get stupid once you hit the Empire, the Undying Sun. You're like a sports figure where people are throwing cash at you left and right. Could be for sponsorships, could be, to do this or that. So you can use that to hire mercenaries. There should be some people left from the original country that you left. You could equip them and train them to be a military force. And then when you go back, you get to decide how you want to do that. Do you make a big raiding party so that you're fighting a war against these things? You could have other people fight the war while you slip in like SEAL Team 6 and try to get to where you need to get to. So it leaves it up to the players that they're really sort of running the show at this point. Nice. And I use modified chainmail rules. So, you could decide and say like, okay, well, we need archers, we need war machines, ballistas, things like that. Magic is somewhat low in the world, but you might be able to find magic users. Also, there's a point where you sort of go out of the world and you're in that black pyramid that I mentioned reconfigures itself. And that's where you'll find all these strange races of creatures. And you can tempt some of them to come back with you, and they're like special forces units. So the wargaming is the players can lead those armies if they want, or they could just tell them like, hey, go here, do this. And it could be in the background, and there's rules to resolve what would happen, like whether they're fighting against like regular military forces, whether they're fighting against undead or other more spiritual forces. So it depends on your players, like how much they're into that and how much they want to play. And if they're like, this sucks, we only want it to be about us, that's fine. You as the DM could still figure out like a very fluid situation. Like on this day, it's safe to go through this area, but on the next day, it's been overrun by this force or that force. So your players may have to detour and all that kind of stuff. And it's one thing that I want to try to, one thing that I hate in certainly video games, but also in some tabletop game settings is like the world never changes regardless of what your players do. Like you could defeat this lich that's been oppressing people for 1,000 years. And then like you go to the next town and nobody cares about you, as opposed to like you would be so revered. So that's what I want to make sure that it has, that as your players have spent time building up their rep in this world and doing these awesome things, that people acknowledge it and it changes the way people look at them. Some people will love them. Some people will hate them even more. So for me, that's features of a good campaign.
Yeah. I like the idea of leading armies and stuff like that. I know that's not something everyone likes. Like again, Malachi here says, I had a 2E player tell me he would not even hire a torchbearer. So it's like there's some people out there that just don't like that concept. But
and that's when I would make them go in the dark and have a really hard time hitting anything. But yeah, I mean it's funny because my players are at a point, they left the capital city, the Empire, the Undying Sun, and they're starting to venture out into the desert, and they're supposed to like investigate all these points, and it's within a year's worth of time, and they're like, hey, we can't, there's no way we can possibly get to all these points. And I'm like, okay, well, you can hire people to do it. And oh, okay. So they hired people that they knew, and then based on that, I roll and see if those people are successful when they get to those areas, and if they can fulfill it. Or one guy's down a hand already, so it's questionable. But there's I like worlds to be big, and I like things, you're not the only people in the world doing things. There are other people, and you can have people do things for you, or you can go it alone. But if you choose to go it alone, it's going to be a lot harder.
My one of my last 5e campaigns that I ran kind of ended up with a big war happening, and like the players made all these alliances and they recruited all these people to form this big army. But the 5e players, they didn't want to like personally lead this army. So basically they were like, the hero unit, the special forces team that were going around doing like all these like side missions and like making sure all this stuff happened. And then I had like kind of like this simple system of like, like opposing walls for like the two armies. And then depending on what the players like accomplished, like, their side got like all these bonuses and stuff like that. So it's like, hey, we took out the giant spiders that were like harassing our left flank. So, you get like a +1 to this wall that, you have to do now. So that's the way I handled it. And so you can still have, like you said, you can still have like that whole feeling with like all these NPCs and all this war campaign that's happening. But you can be the special forces unit that sneaks in. And that's the cool stuff.
And also it solves a DM problem, which is in 5e, players get gold like it's candy. They end up with way too much money. Oh, well, armies are very expensive. So exactly. Say goodbye to those thousands you earned.
Yeah, that's one thing I've heard a lot of people complain about in 5e. It's like, I have all this gold and nothing to spend it on. Yeah. And that's partly, in my opinion, that's partly a misunderstanding of 5e. That's partly just bad DMing, in my opinion. Like you're not, it's pretty easy. Like you've done it here, and you can do it in other ways too, or give your players something to spend money on, make the spellcaster research spells, make the cleric, research some prayer books or something, some spell books as well. Like the fighter can train some hirelings or start like it takes some creative players, but it also takes some GMing that you offer those sorts of things. So that's nice. You're offering it in the campaign itself as kind of built in.
And there's another feature that so starting in okay, so the death saving throws, I think, are a big problem for a lot of people. So instead of just saying we don't have death saving throws, I've built it in where they get removed for story reasons. So in level 1, all the players who take place in the heist will get cursed by the god whose crystal that is. And their curse is that they no longer have death saving throws. Everything else works like normal. But you can be brought back from the dead and all that stuff, but you don't get the death saving throws. You hit 0, that's it. The exception is I created a system. I'm going to have to rename it because apparently they're calling something else boons in the 2024 edition. But basically, you can pray to your god, who will basically extend the player who's at 0 will extend their life out to the end of their next turn. So you would then have a chance to revive them. But in order to get that boon, you have to do things that benefit your god. So, and there's different things that you have to do at different levels. So I've broken it down into like good, neutral, and evil gods. And so like for the good, I think in the beginning, like you have to donate a certain amount of gold, and it's not an easy amount of gold to get. Like you have to donate that to the temple or to an orphanage or something like that. For the evil people, like you have to steal that amount of money from your party. And as you get like one of the upper level, like once you hit level 5, one of the ones for good is you have to convert somebody to your god, whether it's a player or an NPC, and it has to be like a sincere conversion. Because your god will not be happy if it's fake. And like the evil, it might be that you have to kill somebody or make a significant sacrifice, which could be a person or it could be like a rare animal or something to your god. And there's tables that you roll from to figure out what they have to do. But
the conversion is good because you have like that prophet skill, so that ties nicely into that.
If you take it,
yeah, exactly. But if you don't, you might be screwed because it's going to be harder to convert somebody.
Absolutely. But yeah, so that happens at level 1, and if those characters die, you say, what happens? Well, eventually you have to get this item called the ingot, which you're then sort of carting around to it has lots of plot mechanics, but one of the things it does is within a 1 mile radius, nobody has death saving throws. So also wherever you go, people are noticing like, man, people are really dying a lot easier than they used to.
That's kind of funny. I think death saves, part of me is kind of like torn half and half on them in 5e because, on the one hand, they do create like a whack-a-mole type game, I think, potentially. But then on the other half, like I've told this story before, Vic was playing again in my Adventure in Middle Earth campaign or game, and they were going through the woods and some wolves attacked them. And one of the characters I'm going to be brave and I'm going to go out in front, got taken down to 0. He's doing his death saves. And I just had the wolf like, that wolf's just going to grab your body and start dragging you into the woods. Like you're unconscious, you're food now. So like, it doesn't matter if your saves make it or not. Like you're going to get eaten. And it did. That was one of those instances where I'm like, okay, death saves in this instance are kind of fun because it made a very like dramatic moment because Vic and the other characters was like, oh no, we got to go save our friend. So, they fought their way through a line of wolves and, killed the wolf that was dragging their friend off. And, it was exciting. And it was fun.
Yeah. There are things to be said for the way that they work. The problem is there's then too many healing spells that make it too easy to bring you back up.
Yeah.
So if someone can magically give you 1 hit point from 60 feet away, it really, it's not the greatest thing. Also the healing spirit, which, okay, you go down, but then you're automatically up. It just makes it
sure.
Yeah. You either have to take, you have to reduce the way the healing works, or you have to get rid of the death saving throws, or you need to change the death saving throws so that like maybe you get 3 death saving throws but you only get 3 death saving throws within a 1-day period, or something like that.
Yes.
Which could work too. I went with the more deadly option.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying one way or another it's good or bad. I was just always down on them for a while, and then that situation happened, and I'm like, oh, okay, I can see how this is good. But you're right, like there's lots of other things that layer on top of that that make death
Too
inconsequential.
impossible.
Yeah, inconsequential, impossible. It's one of those things with 5e where it's very hard to write for, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because there's so many interlinked things, and you're like, you could maybe add an ability, and you think, well, this is really cool, and you're like, oh shoot, I just made death saves even easier. You know?
Yeah.
It's like, uh-oh.
Yeah, that happens a lot with 5e. There's a lot of interconnectedness that you can't really see on the surface at first.
Yeah. And that's something I've come to realize about the whole sandbox versus Rails argument. I don't think it's sandbox on one side, Rails on the other. I think Rails are somewhere in the middle, and way off to the other side, there is cooperative storytelling.
Oh, yeah.
And if you want to play a game by necessity, and the Nevada Commission on Gaming will tell you it's true, there must be an element of chance. So in earlier editions, you had a lot of chance that you weren't going to make it. In 5e, there's still chances that you could die, but everybody knows it's way more lethal at levels 1 and 2 than it is, at levels 5 or 10. But some people just want to do cooperative storytelling, which, if that's what they want, that's fine. They don't want to see any characters dying. They don't really want to have to work that hard to roll for things. Like Matt Colville's new system. One of my friends,
or something.
Yeah, he sent me a PDF to look at because he's going to start a campaign. I'm going to play in, and it's just like, and it really is geared towards. It's not really a game. It's storytelling. Not comparative. Let's say cooperative storytelling, where it's like, are any of these characters going to die? But for this, it's horror, and horror movies mean there's probably going to be a high body count. So I wanted to bring back the element of you very well may end up dead.
Yeah. Well, and I've noticed this a lot with a lot of people taking 5e in this direction. Again, like I've talked about, Adventures in Middle Earth kind of takes it in that direction where, I think what makes Adventures in Middle Earth good is it like a whole there's no spellcaster class.
Mm-hmm.
It's just completely removed, because you're not going to be a wizard in Tolkien's universe, because those are like special angelic beings. Yeah. So that's going to be locked as an NPC sort of thing. And they're rare. There's only like a few in the whole world. So spellcasting is totally gone. And so when you completely move spellcasting, it's sort of like all of a sudden those death saves and a lot of those problems, they work a little. They're not as big of a problem anymore. Mm-hmm. And then we mentioned Broncolonia, which like caps levels at level 6, and then beyond that, you're just getting these like mini feat sort of things. And then you've interpreted it this way. And I think that is a neat creative way to look at 5e, mm-hmm. and sort of like, because when you look at 5e, it, the whole intention of it when it was built was like, this is going to harken back to 1e. This is going to harken back to BX. We're not going this like 3.5, 4e high adventure, overpowered superhero thing, even though 5e still has that. But the original intention was we're gonna draw this back. Yeah. So the root of it is still there. So I think it is possible to like bring it back from a less superhero game to something that would fit horror.
I mean, I think 5e does a great job of splitting the middle, where it took some of the advances that we saw in like 3 and 4e and kept some of them, but it brought back a lot of the stuff that was missing from 1e, and it's like kind of right down the middle. So that's why I think almost everybody wants to tweak it, because everybody has their own idea of like what makes a good campaign, what makes a fun story or adventure. So like, because it's right in the middle, like you need to do a little work one way or the other to modify the game. But overall, I think 5e is a great playset that's pretty extensible.
Yeah, I've talked about how it's not my favorite system at all, but it's not that it's bad or anything. You can totally have fun in it. Like I've had a lot of fun in it. Like I have very fun memories over the last 10 years from various sessions and game campaigns and stuff like that. So
yeah, I see World Bigfoot Central. 5e is D&D for crybabies with safety vests and training wheels on so no one can die. Well, take the training wheels off. I mean, that's all you got to do.
If you play just the 3 core books and you play it the way D&D is supposed to be played, dungeon delving and exploration and all that stuff, it's fairly lethal. It's not nearly as baby's first D&D as people claim it is. But if you start tacking on all the other like options, and if you just let players run wild, then
I think playing monsters smart too. You have to, especially like in your thing, you're talking about this is horror. So you have to play monsters in an intelligent way. And if you're able to play monsters intelligently, and a lot of people complain about monsters like, oh, I put my monster in front of my players and then they just like took it out in one turn, which, okay, that can totally happen. It can happen in a lot of different editions, even older ones though too, if you get unlucky. But like if you're playing it smart and you're reading those monster abilities and stuff like that, because I've been tempted to do this, and if I feel like I've been tempted to do this, I know that there's lots of DMs that have been tempted to do this as well and failed and gave into this temptation, which is like, oh geez, like I don't want to use that ability because that wouldn't be fun for the players. Like you know what I mean? Where they you sort of like gimp the monster unintentionally. So I think those training wheels are sometimes imposed on by the DM, and it's imposed on by the DM because they're totally concerned with we got to have a good story. They got to get to the next story beat. Like no, if especially in your thing, like if it's horror, your character's dead, make a new character. That's what happens in horror. Like
and it's I have to agree with that.
I've been slowly working on a new version of my 5e modern stuff, and it's going to be like kind of like a standalone game this time. So I'm like kind of like hacking 5e myself. And one thing I'm trying to solve the whole lethality thing is that I'm tying like the rests and stuff to actually like equipment and like environment. So if you're like resting in like a fully stocked hospital, obviously you're gonna like heal a lot better than if you're like in the middle of like a dungeon with there's like a dirty bandage. So like that's kind of what I'm trying to do there. But
and you can kind of keep those mechanics, but you're changing them to fit the setting.
That's for me that was one of the problems with 5e is like in some ways I wish I could just totally gut the long rest in terms of getting all your hit points back and getting all your abilities back, but unfortunately for me I found it like it was just too tied into the system. So the best way to do it is to deny people the ability to get comfortable long rests, and to enforce other things like I've had groups who get random wandering monsters attacks at night, and I've had like fighters of course I'm in full armor. Oh, okay. So I let them do the fight in the full armor, and then the next morning like, well, you didn't get any sleep because you were trying to sleep in chainmail. So you could do that. You have to make things uncomfortable. And it's funny with my test group, I just got a couple new players like a month ago. And as soon as the new players get in there, they're like, hey, be careful with your abilities because he likes to have a bunch of encounters before you get to rest. So, warning them that you might have to be a little more conservative, which I think is great.
Let's see here. 5e DMG does a poor job teaching DMs. I think partly it does lack some basic tools in the DMG. However, I think a part of the problem, Vic and I, and if Crossface and a few others have talked about this, it's kind of humorous to us. And look, I'm not a 5e expert at all, but a lot of people complain about things, and there's a rule for it in the DMG. My games aren't lethal enough. Well, there's a rule there's plenty of actually tools in the DMG if people actually read them. To make your game a lot more lethal, like a wound system, like there's a way to modify rests.
Long rests a week.
So there's lots of stuff, and that's not the DMG's fault that people don't read it. That's not the book's fault.
It makes a lot of stuff optional, and then because people have like rule zero brain, they're like, well, it's optional, so I don't need to know it. So
yeah, and I'm not going to read it. And it's like, but it's there. The solution to your problem is there in the rules. So it's like,
yeah. And that's another thing too. Is I think some of it has to do with the world that we live in, and it's not necessarily the game's fault. I know you've had the Dungeon Minister on. And I've talked to him about this, which is that most people in Europe, in the US, and Asia do not go to church anymore. So they don't quite understand the role that religion would have played in these kind of societies. And therefore, saying, oh, I'm a cleric of this god is like saying you go bowling on Tuesday nights. So is that really a problem that the religion isn't compelling, or is it that people don't necessarily know how to interact with it? And another thing is we live in pretty darn good times where very few people die of horrible diseases. So like one thing that's going to be on the website, if for free eventually, if people sign up, is I'm working on a list of diseases, what they would like, where you would encounter them. So it's like you get this from a wound. This is like an epidemic disease like smallpox, or you just get from the air or from bad water, and like certain kind of herbs that you would use to treat it, and then where you might find those herbs, like it's a desert herb, it's in the forest, whatever. And I'll have a database for that on the website for free. But I've included a lot of those things in the book, like, hey, if you're in this, like there's one area, the dark heart of the forest, that's kind of swampy. It's like, well, if you get bitten by this kind of mosquito that's as large as a hawk, your roll for a disease when the battle's over, and they might end up with malaria. If you get injured, like if you get cut by anything in that area, roll for another kind of disease, they might get sepsis, And so I think by doing that, it makes the world seem a lot more, and it does make some of those other features, like you always got that one guy who wants to be the herbing guy, and like there's kind of nothing for him to do unless you allow him to make healing potions. So this way, like, oh, okay, well, you would know that you need such and such a herb that will treat it, and it makes him feel good. And makes it useful.
That's a very 1E take too, because 1E has the notorious disease tables and stuff like that, which can be quite brutal. It tells, and it kind of has a similar thing, where you might get this disease from going through the sewers under the city, as you're dungeon delving down there, and it's like, well, it makes sense. It's the sewers, it's dirty, and that's another one of those things where it's like, you could easily implement that in your game, and a lot of people don't, but whatever.
Yeah, I think the only time I've really seen it implemented in 5e was along one stretch of river in Tomb of Annihilation, when you're in Chult, and that's about it.
Yeah. So heightened imagination says, I like your approach, a lot of verisimilitude in catching diseases and treating them. So
thank you. And so like for me, that a lot of stuff like that is kind of low-hanging fruit, and something that's missing, like the whole infamous wheelchair debate. To some extent, I have a lot of sympathy for the argument that why wouldn't there be all sorts of disfigured people all over the world? And the counter argument is, well, there's like greater restoration. Well, okay, but by the time you get the spell Greater Restoration, you're going to be like, you're not going to be priest so-and-so. You're going to be like cardinal so-and-so. Yeah. And are you going to have time to
heal every peasant?
First of all, and how many cardinals are there going to be? So if you're off in the middle of the wilderness in some little town, and someone, they break their leg and they can't walk after that's a real possibility. And to me, it's if you take that away, you're kind of missing the opportunity for your players to be awesome. Like if you have a paladin and you're going around curing the sick in the name of your god, I mean, people are going to love you.
Yeah. My issue with that argument isn't that like oh well, we have magic, we can cure that stuff. No, my issue is like, yeah, you're in a wheelchair, you're not gonna go into this dungeon and like fight 20 orcs. Like,
Yeah.
I don't care that I agree. Yeah, there's gonna be people in wheelchairs, there's gonna be people with arms missing and eyes missing and like rolling around on little carts because they just have like stumps for legs and stuff
arrows,
like that. And
arrows to the knee.
Yeah. But they're not gonna be high level adventurers, sorry, at least not in my campaign. So
I mean, and the other thing that bothers me about that is, why do you think you're going to start with an awesome combat wheelchair?
Yeah.
If you're level 1, you get a tree stump with 2 wagon wheels nailed to it. That's all you get. You got to work for that magic chair.
Yeah, I mean that thing that an artisan would have made and probably would have cost you like 20,000 gold.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
I mean, but that being said, if you look at the artificer class at level 3, you can build fake legs. Like, there's no reason why you couldn't flavor that as building like some kind of tread-based wheelchair that could go upstairs or something. But I mean, I'm not putting in accessibility ramps into any of these dungeons, so
no,
you're welcome to try that if you want. See how that goes.
You can't stop that, but yeah. So what's this comment here from Juan Cholo? I was sex crawling in a wagon, tried across the mountains. My character got dysentery and died.
Somewhere past St. Louis, huh?
That reminds me, like, I need to write something to support cowpunchers. And I've had this idea for talking about disease and stuff. I've had this idea for like an Oregon Trail style campaign book where you'd go like the Mormon Trail or the Oregon Trail or one of those trails. And it'd be funny to have like, you died of dysentery. Sorry.
What's this PC game that came out like, I don't know, like 5 years ago, maybe longer, like time is kind of weird, but it was called Oregon Trail, as in like organs, and it was like Oregon Trail but during the zombie apocalypse, and it was actually really cool.
That's cool. I have to look that one up. I missed that one.
Yeah.
No, but I think that's cool. I'm gonna, we have a lot of new people watching. I'll throw your Kickstarter again in the chat here for those of you out there that want to maybe get notified. It's in the video description, but I'm dropping it in the chat here as well. And,
get a free module.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll get your website in there too. Here's his website. There are no death saves in Oregon Trail. Nope.
Nope.
I always felt bad when you played that game because you name it like your friends and your family, and you're like, "Oh no, my little brother died." Whoops.
Oh, I don't know. We'd always put like bad words like ass or something.
Yeah. So you're offering a lot of extra stuff with this Kickstarter. So I'm kind of curious if in your next Kickstarter, if you'll do the same, because I did stretch goals for my last Kickstarter, and I'll be honest, I kind of regret it now because it's just like I have so much more work to do, and I'm like, I kind of wish it was done. Like, but yeah.
Well, yeah, we'll have to see. So, in terms of the modules that you're going to get for buying it, those are things that I was going to do anyways.
Yeah.
Part of, I mean, I have to pay people to write them, but I am kind of interested in seeing how other people would take my world and like take certain things in other directions. And the modules, I don't want to say that they're non-canonical, but they're optional. They don't have to happen in this timeline if you don't want them to. So it's something that I plan on. I think I can make one module per month without too much trouble going into the future. So I don't have a problem with that. The extra players book that you would get, that's something I think you really need because, excuse me, obviously you don't want people looking through your guide, the source guide, because they're going to find out all the secrets, all the cool stuff. But they do need some sort of background information if your world is different from a standard D&D world.
Makes sense.
So that needs to be done. And really all that is just me copying, pasting stuff that I've already written in like a smaller version. The actual stretch goals, are a couple maps, maybe printing the player's guide for it, if it gets to a certain level. And then it's extra art. So why wouldn't I want extra art? So I don't think I'm offering too much. I'm not offering like t-shirts. I'm not offering stickers or bottle cap openers or Zippo lighters or anything. So I think I don't think it's anything too excessive for this. In the future, I would like to offer things like custom minis. I also do some woodworking. I was hoping to get I have like a cool carrying case with a wooden DM screen, but there's no way I'll have time to make those in time for this campaign. So maybe on the second one.
Yeah, all the stuff that I did for stretch goals, I was going to do anyway as well. But then, now there's a deadline to it. So that's like the main problem.
it sounds like you have some stuff already done, and I think that's really key. Like when I did my Kickstarter, I think this would have taken a lot longer if I hadn't have had it written and laid out and done already. So that was a big help, that like the book is pretty much done. I just need funding to get the print done. So it's like
it's mostly done chapter wise. 1 through 7 just need final edits. About South Bay, about the Empire, the Undying Sun, those are out for final edits. About the game is that final edit is done. So it's really just the last 2 chapters that I have to write, which are not too bad. And then just some errata like the new character class. And I do kind of like spell out for potential DMs like, hey, this is how I envision this thing working. So you may want to change this rule and that rule. And like I updated like grappling rules so that you can apply a restrained condition to an opponent through like more grappling, but it leaves you vulnerable if somebody else attacks you, blah, blah, blah. And just some updated rules and like, hey, you might want to get rid of like Goodberry because they're going to be traveling out in the desert, and that sort of negates all the resource management you would need to do, and like certain spells like that.
Or change Goodberry. Maybe sometimes doesn't always work, or
call it Badberry.
Yeah, you call it Badberry. You get some you get some food poisoning or something like that.
Well, well, it's funny you mentioned that because I had a druid who I do have like a clear separation between the 4 kinds of magic, being arcane, divine, nature, and science. So you can run afoul of, except for science, in the other 3, you can sort of run afoul of things. Arcane, like if you abuse it too much, it can be like a drug, like an opiate. The divine, if you piss off your god, they can withdraw their powers. I had that happen. There's a tournament. If you win, you get to ask a god a question. How they make that happen is they have a human sacrifice to do it. And my paladin, who worships a good god, he just stood there and didn't do anything, so he lost his powers for quite a while. Sorry, I forgot where I was going with this. Oh, yes. So I had a druid who did kind of the same thing. The druid was just willy-nilly like killing animals in the desert and like, bushwhacking their way through cactus fields and stuff. And it pissed off the local spirits of nature. So his spells started backfiring. And that would have been a sour berry.
Yeah. Sour Patch Kid berries. Yeah. First they're sour, then they're sweet. I don't know. You get a bad berry if you start playing Led Zeppelin in the background and hanging up psychedelic posters.
So in this game, I do not shy away from vices either. There are a lot of narcotic substances. Sometimes you'll meet a character who's the chiefess of the elves. She's old as dirt, and she's high all the time. Like when you go see her, you have to make a con save versus secondhand high.
Yeah.
But she uses the drugs in order to access the dream realm and to be able to remember it more. So she can go in, and because you can contact gods, you can contact people from other parts of the world, and that's what she's using it for. But there's other ways you can do it. You never have to take drugs. Like you could do a sweat lodge, you can get a runner's high, clean living. But I don't shy away from that. And there are like drunkenness tables, like you would get back before the Satanic Panic ruined all that stuff. So there's plenty of good things like that in there.
I like narcotics in games like that. In
Yeah.
Atomic Punk, I have a narcotics and effects, and I actually have levels of addiction that your character can fall into, and one of those, the highest level, if you start failing your saves, you'll just die of an overdose because you have to continually be taking more drugs of that type to stay at the baseline to just function.
Yeah,
because they don't give you a high anymore, and so you might just overdose. Who knows?
I have a class in Modern Necessities called the Psychonaut, and they're basically like an MK Ultra, like psychic wizard. And they have to take psychedelics to like use their powers, but if they take too much, there's a chance that they're going to start hallucinating, and they're actually going to get attacked by like astral monsters and stuff like that. So they kind of have to balance it.
Yeah, I mean, I even have I think what did I call it? Like Starry Gnome coffee, which is basically like the espresso version of civet coffee, where you can go a whole day and not sleep and not gain a level of exhaustion. But after that, you'll have 2 levels of exhaustion. So there's that. And then sometimes you could get addicted to something. And if you want to detox, then you'll have to like take some days or a week off, which depending on what your characters are doing, that could be bad. If your character's like, well, we're at this dungeon, we have to leave you in the cart because you're a drooling maniac, and you already think you have spiders all over you. So
yeah, you said civet coffee, which is the coffee that's like in the cat poo. Does that mean that this is a gnome poo, or like because it's called Starry Gnome? So
no, it is more like civets, but they're the country that you start in. You're in a backwater region, but the country itself is like they're just about to hit an industrial revolution. They're not quite there, but they're you could see the signs that they're almost there. So there's a lot of like patent medicine that and patent products that you would buy, like you would have seen in the 1700s or early 1800s in the US. So there's that. There is a kind of healing potion, Dr. Scott's stab resolver, that people like to get. It's kind of like laudanum, but it does help to staunch the bleeding, stabilize you. So I try to put fun things in like that. But then when you get like to the Empire of the Undying Sun, it's more like a Bronze Age civilization.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. We're getting on the 2-hour mark here. I've thrown the link in multiple times in the chat. It's in the video description below. So make sure you sign up. Like you said, you're going to get some adventure modules for it, which is cool. And is there anything else you want to give, like as we wrap up here? I think like final thought maybe that we maybe missed, or you want to reiterate?
The most important thing in any game that you're going to play is that people are having fun. And I think this is going to be a really fun game. There's a lot of different ways that you can play it. It's very flexible. Overall, it's a horror game, many different kinds. It's an overarching cosmic horror, but you'll find areas of body horror, areas of possession, horror that people do to each other. It's a lot of fun. I think people who do not like 5e, but I think that you would like the way this game feels. I'll say that. And while I'm here, just put a plug for my YouTube channel. Why don't you come on? Why don't you go on over Yang Yan Zhao 4 on
you have the link? I'll later. I'll put it in the description too.
Oh, okay.
and I can
I
put
think
it.
it's just youtube.com / at Young and Jeff. Let me see here. But I've got lots of people on all the time. So recently we had, I saw him here, Immortal Rising Comics. I had him on talking about stuff. I've had you guys on. I had Richard Witters, former art director for Magic the Gathering and D&D, the Dungeon Delver, Dungeon Minister, and we talk about a lot of comics too. I had Mark Biller on a month and a half ago.
That's awesome.
So come by for some fun talks, and occasionally I upload videos with my poor thoughts on how to run games.
Oh, you put the chat. You put it in chat there already. I'll I put it in there as well. I'll put it on the Twitter side as well, so people get that, and I'll add that to the stream later.
Yeah. And I'm also Young and Zhao for it on Twitter. So if you're there, stop on by.
Cool. Vic, you have any final thoughts or words you want to?
No, not really. Keep an eye on Modern Necessities. Main book should hopefully be done soon. Layout is pretty far along. Just in case there's people that were watching that were backers, I want to let you know that as layout is progressing, I'm noticing some like gaps, as in like, you know, some dead space. And I don't want to delay things for like months longer because, you know, we were talking about artists earlier. So I'm biting the bullet and I'm using some stock art to fill in the gaps. So hopefully nobody will mind, but it's just something I have to do. There's still plenty of cool art that I paid for. I put almost $5,000 into this stuff so far this year. So don't worry. But yeah, I just wanted to let people know that in case, you know, they recognize something from another book or from Dive RPG and they yell at me. Like, at least I was honest about it. So
yeah, we got a lot of people coming. They're catching it late. So watch the replay, guys.
That's all right.
You know, but for me, Makuhito has been going out. Finally, this has gone out. If you haven't gotten the mail, it's probably on its way. If it's not on its way, it's because you didn't give me a good address. So I'm going to have to get in touch with you. But I just have to get those last books out, pay the fulfillment company. The logistics company's already been paid. And then I'm done with this Kickstarter finally. So very thankful for that. I want to thank you for coming on, man. I wish your project the best of luck. I hope people.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. It's
Yeah,
always fun to talk about games, and you know, it's fun to be on this side sometimes.
Agreed. Yeah.
And you know, it's 5e, but I'm actually really interested in it, and maybe I can. Maybe I've kind of like drifted away from 5e, but then I kind of find myself like kind of interested in going back and revisiting it with fresh eyes again because it's been a few years. And you know, looking at it a bit more because just the way the landscape's going, I think it's going to be, you know, there's going to be people that are going to have fond memories of 2014 5e, and you know, there's gonna be people that want stuff for it. So just like how they want stuff for 3.5 or 1e or 2e, whatever it is. So
well, I think too, the other nice thing about it is right now the driving force for 5e is still with Wizards of the Coast, and where they're driving us, I don't know how many people want to go. So the more they take a hands off, the more other people will be able to say, oh, you know, well, what can we do with 5e?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, for those of you that just joined in and missed it, I'm sorry. Go ahead and watch the replay. I'm going to try and do some more like impromptu streams in the weeks to come, and I'm really going to try and like, because of Makuhito, I've just sort of been like drained emotionally, spiritually, energy wise. So I didn't really devote much time to my channel like I should have over the last few months. But now that we're getting to the point where this is getting resolved and all that stuff, and I'm going to be done with it, I do want to start devoting more time to this. So, do a favor, like, subscribe, share the video. And if you want to support the channel, you can on the Gilded server right here on YouTube or on Subscribestar. And I want to thank Vic for hanging out as well. As always, thanks, man. And again, thanks for being on, man. Like I said, I hope people check out your project. They sign up for the pre-launch on Kickstarter on your website. Get those free modules. They're free.
Free.
And we'll catch you guys in the next stream, I guess.
Yep. Bye,
Thanks, everyone.